Gentlemen, thank you for being here this evening. Cadets, welcome to Leaders 411, the senior leaders panel from the class of 1979, sponsors of Leadership Day every year, even including this unusual year of COVID-19 when we're offering this course to you virtually. But that allows us to compress space and time and invite some really special graduates of the Citadel here to speak with you this evening. I'm going to have each of these gentlemen introduce themselves very briefly. You've got their bios as part of the course, and then we're going to have them talk a little bit about how their Citadel experience informed their careers and helped them bridge from where you are today to where they are now. So I'll start with Mr. Peter Salerno. Mr. Salerno, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background from the Citadel onward?
Well, I attended, obviously, graduated in '79. I'm from northern New Jersey, right outside of New York City. When I left the Citadel, I joined the Navy. I was an ensign on the USS Puget Sound. Because I am bilingual, trilingual back then, they put me on a ship that was stationed in Italy. So I was not only a supply corps officer, but also the interpreter for the Admiral of the 6th Fleet, and spent 3 days in Italy, 3 years in Italy. And it was an amazing experience. Again, culturally, visiting all these countries, and at 21 years old, being exposed to all this culture was actually eye-opening for me, and probably one of the best decisions I ever made.
Terrific. And then where did your career lead you from there? What was the brief step out of the Navy and into what line of work?
Well, my dad, I was a business major at school, and I basically concentrated on marketing when I was there. So I went into Pony Sports and Leisure, which is like Nike back then in the early 80s, and joined them as an internal auditor. So I thought that the business world was the way I wanted to go. So I was going to climb the corporate ladder. Little did I know, there was a lot of confusion and backstabbing and a lot of things that I really wasn't prepared for. Did not like the culture, even though I was able to save them $250,000 in restructuring their auditing department. I couldn't get a $2,000 raise. So after a month, I just resigned. Luckily, my dad had a cabinet business, small little cabinet business with about 5 people working for him. So I joined his business short term, which ended up being 15 years. So I was able to use my business skills to grow his business. So he went from a 2,000 square foot facility, and we developed that into a 20,000 square foot facility with 40 people and one of the top kitchen and bath design firms in northern New Jersey. So I was with him for 15 years. And then in 1997, I started my own business, which has blossomed. And, you know, I have a staff now of 8 people, designers. I do high-end work. It's my own business. My kids are in the business with me now. You know, in the past 15 years, I'm happy to say we won 35 national awards. So, you know, I like to think that we're at the pinnacle of our industry. So it's a great place to be.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. Mr. Horton, why don't you kick off? What did you major in at the Citadel, and how did you get from where you were then to where you are now?
I was a political science major pre-law at the Citadel. Ever since I was 8 years old, I always wanted to go in the military. 5th generation Army, going back to the Revolutionary War. My father, he was severely wounded in Korea. Thank God he made it, or I wouldn't have gotten to wear the ring. So I went to the Citadel in that first generation of African Americans that went to the Citadel. I was an F troop. If you can see behind my wall, you'll see an F troop flag there. Every company commander during my time will get presented the F troop flag, and it proudly hangs on my wall back there. I had a pretty a challenging time at the Citadel, being in that first generation. And I can tell you what you are taught at the Citadel in terms of being able to handle that type of life. I don't care where you come from, how big of a stud you think you are, how prepared you are. When you get to the Citadel and the kind of life and transition to being a principal leader, you're never prepared for it when you walk through the same gate. And as most of you can probably attest, but you are molded, and I wish we had the Krause Leadership Center when I was there. I went to Airborne School as a junior with Glenn Walters, your current president, and General McKenzie. We all went to Airborne School together as juniors, and we're the closest of friends still. And just one quick story before I jump into my transition, and Glenn Walters always reminds me of this when we meet. On my fourth jump in Airborne School, my parachute didn't deploy. So I was plunging to the ground. It was a low-level jump, so I was too low to pull my reserve. But lucky for me, one guy deployed his chute under me. I landed on top of his parachute and climbed down the risers and we bear hugged to the ground. The good thing about that is the Black Cats, or the instructors, made me go right back up before I graduate to get back on that horse. So one thing you do learn at the Citadel is if you fall down, you get back up and you keep moving. And I was too dumb and stupid to realize how scary that really is. And I wasn't scared one bit. We were laughing and joking on the way down. But after a few hours, I realized what could have happened. But anyway, I commanded F Troop. I was in on sword drill, Real Guard Summer Guard. Placed second in Star of the West as a sophomore, and was on regimental staff as a corporal. And then as I transitioned out of the Citadel, I went into the Army as a regular Army field artillery officer. I was deployed to Germany. I commanded twice. I commanded troops twice over there, one as a lieutenant, one as a captain. Came back and got into my secondary. So my secondary was called Systems Automation, Software Engineering, and that changed my life. It was right when Bill Gates deployed his first Windows operating system, the very first one. Is when everything was transitioning from mainframe to desktop computing. I got into that field. My secondary was at Forcecom, where I worked for General Colin Powell, and he was a 4-star there. I was in J6, near on his staff, and very impressive guy. When he left, I was told I would never go back to systems automation again. So I left the military, went into the computer sciences field, and within a year, my salary was in 6 figures, because that was right when everything was turning automation. So I stayed there. I've been with AT&T. I'm currently with IBM. I work with 7 or 8 different technology companies, from regional manager all the way up to an executive director. I'm currently with IBM now, managing technology projects from around the world, multi-million-dollar projects in every time zone you can think of, right here in Atlanta. I'm at the point now I'm ready to retire. They're working me like I'm 30 years old, and I'll be 64 this year. So I went into a rebellion, grew a beard, which I've already caught crap for on this call with my my fellow compadres here, because if you've known me back then, you would have never thought I would grow a beard. But now I'm in my heading toward retirement, feeling good about things, and I'm able to share with you, as you ask questions, all the challenges you will have moving to civilian life.
Thank you, Mr. Horton. We appreciate that. Lieutenant General Nicholson, sir, pleasure to have you. We'd love to hear a little bit about your experience. Sir, you're on mute.
Thanks, Ted. Yeah, just a quick introduction, and then whenever you want, I got just a few minutes of comments to make on leadership as we move forward.
Knock them out, sir.
I just want to say Greg Horton was one of the most squared away cadets, other than Lonnie Bergeron, that we had in the class. And it's a little interesting to see the facial hair on what was one of the premier cadets of our class. Hey, I graduated from the Citadel in this great class, and I was a business major, and I decided to go into the Marine Corps. And I went in the Marine Corps for 4 years. And about that third year, I was an infantry officer. About that third year in the Marine Corps, I kind of looked around, and I really enjoyed the caliber of the folks that I was serving with, the young men and women that I was leading, the young men and women that were surrounding me. It was just an eye-watering group of talent. And so I decided, hey, I'm going to stay a couple more years. And then I decided I'm going to stay a couple more years. And before you know it, I got 39 years in the Marine Corps, and I'm looking around. And I love it when, you know, young Marines say, hey, General Nicholson, when did you decide to make it a career? And I used to tell them, you know what, I'm still kind of thinking about it. I never woke up one morning and said, I'm going to be a career Marine. It happened because I loved what I was doing, and I loved the men and women that I was serving with, and I believed in the mission. And I had the great opportunity in 39 years as a Marine to lead Marines in combat in Fallujah, Iraq. As a regimental commander, I had the opportunity to lead Marines in Afghanistan as a one-star. I commanded the 1st Marine Division at Camp Pendleton. And my final job in the Marine Corps was commanding the 30,000 Marines of the 3rd Marine Expeditionary Force in the Western Pacific. So I've been incredibly blessed, incredibly humbled, and it is an honor to be with this next group of great graduates this evening. And I look forward to talking a little bit about leadership as we move forward.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Mr. May.
Yes, sir.
Welcome.
All I can say is I'm glad I wasn't out ahead of Greg out of that plane. Yeah, so I graduated, obviously, with the rest of the panel, class of 79, with a degree in poli-sci. I also earned an MBA from Wake. I've been licensed Series 24, 79, and 63, and I've spent almost 40 years in commercial and corporate banking. My last stint has been with JP Morgan Chase. And during those years, I've had opportunity to lead, starting off with small wholesale teams and then regions and then multi-state areas. And territories. So I've managed some large teams from time to time. But I did want to really salute the Citadel and the Center for its focus on servant leadership. And if you have a chance to look at my bio, you'll see a reference to a handful of not-for-profit organizations. And frankly, those represent only a handful of all the organizations through the years I've served with. And, you know, at times in our industry, you're encouraged to serve with these type of organizations. I assure you, and still is, when I have the opportunity to serve. And so I hope you never forget that. The one thing I would encourage all of you is that when
Mr. May, you're on mute, sir.
wow.
We lost you at the one thing we would encourage you. The one thing I would encourage you.
Oh, find an organization that you have a passion about and make an impact, serve in a leadership role. So don't ever forget that.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. Mr. Mills, welcome. I've got you on mute, so if you come off mute, we'd love to hear from you, sir.
Okay, is that working?
Yes, sir. We've got you loud and clear. Thank you. Welcome.
Perfect. Well, I graduated with the rest of these guys, and I have to second the motion as it relates to Greg Horton. He was a pretty squared away guy, and I saw him from the first day that he was a knob, because I was in the adjacent company. I came from H Company initially. You know, I had the I think the good fortune, frankly, of having spent a couple of years in a company. I was in the same company as Pete Salerno, so we were knobs together. I've known each other for, you know, a long time now. But I had the good fortune of being in a company and then going to regimental staff. I spent 2 years on regimental staff. And I say good fortune because I know we're going through some transitional periods at the college now. But I think it was good for me because it taught me about moving on in life and never leaving people behind, but still meeting new friends, making new acquaintances, learning new in different ways, and having different experiences, because I think that's what life teaches you or hands you, and the Citadel really does prepare you for that. So I think I was blessed to be able to do that in some ways. After graduation, I was one of those guys that kind of always knew what he wanted to do. I was a poli-sci major at the Citadel. I knew I wanted to go to law school. I was also an Army ROTC scholarship cadet, and owed some owed 4 years of active duty to the Army at the time. I wasn't sure whether I wanted to make that a career or not. And I knew I wanted to practice law. I thought I did, but I wasn't exactly sure of really what I was going to do. But as my time at the Citadel progressed, I was lucky enough to apply for and get accepted into a few law schools. And then I ended up going to the University of Florida College of Law, deferring my active duty obligation, graduating from there in just a little bit over 2 years, 2 years and 3 months. So I never stopped, went straight through, which almost nobody does. Got out and went on active duty and spent 4 years as a JAG officer at Fort Carson, Colorado, primarily. Went through the JAG school, of course, up at Charlottesville, and like Larry, just absolutely loved what I was doing. If I could have continued to be a trial lawyer, I was trying cases every single day. If I could have continued to do that, I would have stayed forever. Just never had a job more satisfying than that. But I could see kind of what was happening around me with the other more senior officers at the time, and they were trying fewer and fewer cases, and it was really the younger guys that was doing that, and I didn't want to get into that. So I thought that I would go into private practice, which I did. So as my active duty obligation ended, I moved back to Florida and joined a large law firm in Florida, one of the 4 or 5 largest firms in the state at the time, as an associate, and began working pretty hard, as lawyers do sometimes, young lawyers particularly, and did pretty well at it because I had a great background that prepared me from the Citadel, and I had tried a lot of cases when I was in the service. So I did reasonably well and progressed through the ranks, and was made partner early, and was invited to join the board of directors of that firm, which I did as a very young partner, kind of representing that constituency. It was, about 150 lawyers in the law firm at the time, and stayed there and loved the people I worked with there as well. Stayed there for 17 years. I was a department head, ran 5 different offices around the state of Florida, all doing kind of one segment of business work. Complex commercial litigation was all I ever did, and primarily in the construction industry and design industries, but really all kinds of business disputes. And it was a good lesson, I think. As I sat on the board and I saw kind of more senior leaders who did not seem to, after spending years on the board, trying to work within that, did not seem to care as much about the mission, about the livelihood of the organization, as their time horizon was getting shorter and shorter toward their retirement, whereas their time horizon was 4 or 5 years until retirement. There were others that were 25 and 35 years before they were going to retire, and I just didn't see the kind of investment in the future of the firm that I thought needed to be made. So after trying to change that for a number of years and not being entirely successful, I decided to do it myself. So I left, started my own law firm. That was now 17 years ago, and was reasonably successful in doing that. We have a much smaller firm now, but about 25 lawyers with offices in Tampa and in Atlanta. And so we cover cases all over the southeastern United States, but primarily in Florida and Georgia, but some in Alabama, some in Mississippi as well, some in North Carolina, some in South Carolina occasionally. But loved my job. You got to love what you do. I think that's really important. Love the people you're working with. And the Citadel teaches you a lot. I owe just about everything to that college, in the sense that it prepares you well for the different challenges you're going to face as a leader. I can't emphasize enough about the character part of it. My motto has been for 35 years as a lawyer: you never go wrong doing the right thing. You may not always win in the short term, but you will likely always win in the long term by doing the right thing. So
thank you, Mr. Mills.
That's a lesson.
And I have to say, to the cadets who are watching this, you are really having access to a wide variety of incredible experience in technology, in design, in banking and finance, in the military, and in the legal field here for the class of '79 senior leaders panel. And part of what this class is designed to do is to help you connect those dots between what you have been learning in the classroom, what you've been learning in the barracks in terms of leadership and ethics, both good and bad, and how that might apply as you sort of start building a vision for your own careers. Now, Lieutenant General Nicholson has already hinted that he came prepared to talk a little bit about this. So I'm going to start with you, sir. How would you help those cadets think about how to connect the heart and mind of what they're learning at the Citadel with what they may experience in the real world?
Yeah. Ted, I'm going to go ahead and go through just a couple quick minutes of comments here, and I think it'll cover down on some of that. But for the cadets watching, wherever you're watching from, and whenever you're watching, I mean, I don't need to tell you about the current situation in our country today. With COVID and race relations, toxic election cycle, and this has been a pretty tumultuous year for our nation. And I think we have to sit at some point and wonder, what is this reset going to look like? Change is unsettling, but it's inevitable. The challenge for leaders at all levels, whether you're a recent graduate of the Citadel or whether you're a distinguished member of this panel, you don't lead from behind. You lead from in front. And if you don't lead from in front, you're going to get bypassed. For those of you going in the military, our oath and obligation is to the Constitution. This has been a big topic lately. It's not to any person, not to any party. It's not even to the president. I want to stress the importance of an apolitical military. Your politics are your own. And while we strongly encourage everyone to vote, leaders in uniform and leaders in business, and I'm in business now, leaders in business and industry must stay as far away from divisive politics as you can. Military officers are not even allowed to have signs in their yard or bumper stickers on their car supporting a candidate. That's how seriously we take distancing ourselves. We encourage the vote, but we certainly will never talk to subordinates about our feelings in that area. That's good policy for leaders at every station in life, whether you wear the cloth of our nation or not. We in the military, we're a reflection of society, hopefully a good one. We're not immune to societal pressures, drugs, alcohol, race relations, lifestyle, cultural. Are we better in society? Should we strive to be better? I got to tell you, I think we should. Admission standards for our military today, all branches are higher than they have ever been. And thankfully today, there's still more young Americans that want to join than we have room for. And I have a son on recruiting duty right now, and it's incredible the number of young men and women that are ineligible. Never in our nation have there been a larger percentage of the population that is ineligible to serve because they can't pass the ASVAB test or the entrance exams. They can't get through the medical issues, and to include obesity. There's a preponderance of moral and legal issues, and the national estimate today is that 1 out of 3 military-age citizens cannot qualify to enlist. That is the highest rate in our nation, and it's a pretty sobering statistic. Let's talk about leadership. Your greatest and most valuable asset, wherever you go, whatever industry, military or otherwise, your greatest and most valuable asset as a leader are your people, and your greatest commodity is your time. How are you taking care of inspiring your folks? Where are you spending your time? Your time is your currency. You get a very limited amount of time of it, no matter where you go. Everybody wants a piece of it, and you're never going to be able to satisfy every demand that is on your time. Spend it wisely every day. Prioritize where you spend every minute. Time management is part science and part art. Find balance in your load and balance in your life. Understand that you will naturally feel guilty every day about what you're not doing. Even in combat, I struggled with the feeling that I needed to be in multiple places at once. Get over it, prioritize what's important today, tomorrow, and move out. If you have to err, the one area you can't spend too much time on is leading and coaching your subordinates. Too many leaders in all areas think that leadership by email and messaging is the answer. I got to tell you, it's not. They're tools. They are tools that help and assist, but they don't take the place of the deck plate engagement, the need discussions you need to have with your teammates. Push away from that computer, get out of the office, and spend time with your teammates. One of my favorite quotes is, the best fertilizer in any organization is a leader's footprint. And so I ask all my leaders, where you've been stepping, who have you been helping, who have you been coaching and motivating? Leadership starts with observing and learning. Remember standing in that formation as a knob. Remember the cadre, the countless other occasions in high school and middle school where you watched a teacher, a coach, a scout leader, a pastor that was in a leadership role. Like me, you sat in that formation, in that gym, in that classroom, and you took note of those positive things you witnessed and said, man, if I'm ever in charge, I want to do what that corporal did. I want to do what that cadre platoon commander did. And you followed away. But you also note the opposite. And I still have pretty good memories of Nabier sitting there going, man, if I'm ever in charge, I like that. I don't like that. That's not something I'm going to do. That's how you build a tool belt. It's called your leadership belt. As you grow in age and experience, that tool belt gets fuller with good and not so good things you want to remember for when it's your turn to lead. Remember always, your role as a leader means every day you solve problems. You fix things. It's the only reason we have leaders. Yay. Fixing things must be in your DNA. Good leaders make teams better simply by their presence. As leaders, we anticipate, we coach, we mentor, and most of all, we take care and inspire those around us with passion, vision, and dedication to our mission and people. We manage programs, equipment, policies, procedures. We don't manage people. Bristle anytime you hear that. We don't manage people. We lead people. It's mission first and people always. Folks, never underestimate the impact that one engaged and passionate leader can have on an organization. Good leaders, like good coaches, inspire all of us to go beyond where any of us think we can go. Leaders must be approachable, but at the end of the day, a leader must also be able to call balls and strikes when the decision, even when the decision is unpopular. In closing, let me talk about, any team, unit, or business thrives when a member of that team understands his or her role and feels that their role is critical. And I'll tell you, in the military, I mean, I'd walk down to the motor pool and I'd see those mechanics working on tanks or aircraft on the flight line. If those young 20, 21-year-olds, and this applies to business and industry as well, if that young guy in the warehouse, if he thinks that his job is critical to the mission of that company, and he really fundamentally believes and understands how important his role is, he's going to bust his butt. He's going to do everything he can. And again, if you set high expectations, they're going to meet them. If you can make everyone feel that way, that they're indispensable, they will become indispensable. Good leaders have that impact. They make good teams great. They make great teams unstoppable. As our old Chinese friend Sun Tzu very famously said, an army of sheep led by a lion is far more dangerous than an army of lions led by a sheep. Be the lion and lead the lions that you develop. The world is in desperate need of the next batch of lions wearing the band of gold from the Citadel. Don't waste a day. Don't waste a minute. As we say in the Marine Corps, you are now in your prep time. Your nation has never needed you guys more. So go get them, simplify. God bless each and every one of you. And thanks for the opportunity to make a few comments.
Lieutenant General Nicholson, that was terrific. Maybe I should get a volunteer to follow Lieutenant General Nicholson.
Well, I want to follow him because for two reasons. Number one, that excellent template that he laid down about leadership also applies to corporate America. And corporate America is severely lacking in that area. And I'll give you some examples later. Secondly, General Nicholson is for the class of 1979. There's a reason why most flag officers from my class are Marines. I was Army, and I got to tell you, he's first rate, and practically every Marine that was in my class, when we were knobs, they were crazy anyway, because if we run 2 miles, they run 3. If we run 3, they run 5. They always were the best, and you're taking this from an airborne Army guy. I love him to death, but he's a prime example. It's why most of our flag officers from my class are Marines. I have a very brief leadership story. And this has been how I've lived my life in terms of being a leader in the military and also in corporate America. When I was in Grafenwöhr, Germany, on an artillery firing point, I was a second lieutenant executive officer. An executive officer runs the firing battery. We were firing live in Grafenwöhr. And Grafenwöhr is where the German army trained all of their soldiers for World Wars I and II. Very, very historic place. It was a very dusty summer day, and there was this dust trail coming down the road. And the chief of the firing battery ran over to me and said, "Lieutenant Horton, the battalion commander is coming." And so, of course, we straightened everything up to make sure that we can greet him. When he showed up, I went over and saluted. Now, I'm 5'7" on my tiptoes. This guy was like 6'4", okay? So he strolls up to me, all dusty, and he looked down at me and said, "Lieutenant Horton, I'm here to promote you to first lieutenant. But before I do it, I want to tell you a story. And the story I'm going to tell you, I have a brief, it's how I've lived my life. I've never forgotten it." He said, "When I was a second lieutenant in Vietnam, I was a forward observer." Now, for those of you who don't know what a forward observer is, a forward observer in the artillery deployed with the infantry, and they called in artillery fire if needed. He said we were in one hell of a firefight, advancing toward the objective on this hill. He said, now, back then, the brigade commander flew at about 2,000 feet in a helicopter, watching the battle, and said, and then the higher up in rank you went, the higher up you flew in that helicopter looking at the battlefield. So he said the brigade commander was flying at about 2,000 feet, and there was so much fire on the ground, firefighting on the ground. It was this thin red line going straight across the battlefield. And all the soldiers, that thin red line was moving toward the objective. He said, all of a sudden that red line stopped. And the brigade commander was cussing and screaming and threatening to court-martial people, fire, step across that line, continue their attack. He said, but that thin red line from where he was flying on the ground was a wall of flames 10 feet high. And people were literally getting burned alive trying to step through it. And he said, the moral of the story is you fly high enough where you can manage and see the entire battlefield, but land that doggone helicopter every now and then so you know what's happening on the ground. And I never forgot that story. And I've lived by that as a company commander twice in the military and in corporate America in the various jobs I've had. And the last thing I'll say is, don't take for granted what you're learning at the Citadel of being a principal leader. More times than not, while I'm sitting in a restaurant, sitting at a bar, perfectly good strangers will walk up to me and will ask me, did you go to the Citadel? I say, well, how did you know? He said, I can tell by how you carry yourself. How you carry yourself. I didn't know these people, they didn't know me. And at AT&T, I had my little Citadel logo on the, it's like an instant messaging thing. And every now and then someone would say, I can tell you went to the Citadel. I said, why? He said, because it's how you perform your work. You are thorough, you make sure everything is done, and you display good leadership. That's what you're learning at the Citadel. And that's what you got to take out of there. One last thing before I'll pass it on. The one thing that I wish the Citadel had taught me more of. Back then, everything was right, wrong, yes, no, black and white. It was two-dimensional. But when you get out in life, when you leave the Citadel, it's three dimensions because most of the world is running the gray. And that's where your ethical training, that's where your leadership training, your character comes into play. And always take to heart that most of the time you're going to run into the gray areas. And it's those decisions that you make is going to determine if you succeed or fail. And trust me, every right decision you make doesn't mean you're going to win. Because sometimes when you make the right call, you lose. And tactically, but strategically, you win.
Thank you, Mr. Horton. Mr. Salerno, having built a very successful kitchen and bath business as an entrepreneur, what did you learn from the Citadel that carried you forward in your career? And how did you know, you mentioned you had a few changes and you worked for your father and started your own firm. How did you know when it was time to do that? What lessons did the Citadel impart that have helped you be successful in your career?
Well, I mean, probably the biggest thing is fortitude, right? Because there's no possible way that you can go through life without drawing to some of the most challenging days of your life. And I can tell you some of the days, knob year, were some of the most challenging in my life. And many a time throughout my life and my career, I had to draw back and said, back then when I was a knob, thinking I would never make it to the next hour, never mind the next day, I was able to move forward and remember that. And I basically bottled that. And every time I had a challenging situation, I would go back to that situation and said, if I could have achieved that at the Citadel, I can do anything. And that happened when I went to Naval Supply Corps School and challenged there. And I said, I'm not going to be defeated. When I started my business the first time and it failed, and I had to go back with my tail between my legs and ask for my job back and recoup and build my money up again and readjust and go back the second time around knowing I was going to succeed. And all that had to do was all those challenges that I faced. And again, I can't tell you how many times I went back and said, you know what, I look at my ring, look down at my ring, which I still wear after I put it on junior year, and said, let me tell you something, I got 40 years of experience on this hand. And I go back to it over and over again and say, I made it. If I could make it there, I can make it anywhere.
That is a great point. Mr. May, in your career, how would you help these folks build a vision for where they're headed?
Sure. You know, I remember, and we talk about the core values of the Citadel, and you've heard it this evening: honor, duty, and respect. And I can assure you, those are not passe values. Those are values that we should all live and work by. And so leadership is simply the ability working with others to accomplish a goal or a dream or a vision. But the key is working with others. So a strong leader has to ensure that everybody's working in harmony. And if not, if people won't treat each other with dignity and worth, then you can't do that. And so I think at the end of the day, you have to be able to recognize the value in others. And so in my world, that meant you've got to be able to identify team members' strengths and their weaknesses. I always encourage my leaders, when they can, to focus on the strengths, ignore weaknesses, particularly if they're minor. It's easy to focus on minor weaknesses, but over time you will demoralize your team members. So we call this situational leadership. And so a good leader is effective at developing others. They're a coach, they're a mentor. But as I mentioned, the impact of poor leadership can be really debilitating on a team. I once witnessed a high-performing banker get promoted out of a high-performing team as the team lead. And that manager, it was a manager, not a leader, as Larry referenced, proceeded to manage the team solely by metrics, focusing on the gaps and not focusing on team member strengths. And it quickly demoralized the team, and within just a couple of years, that team had over 100% turnover. So I would encourage you to focus on effective leadership, as you heard from some of the folks today.
Now, Mr. Mills, before I get to you, one of my concerns for cadets who are now operating on this 24-hour cadet schedule and can exhibit some of that fortitude and some of that drive and work ethic that Mr. Salerno alluded to. One thing Mr. Horton said is, you know, you get out of the Citadel, it's not black and white, it's three-dimensional. You operate in a much grayer area, and I think the law probably offers a lot of opportunity to see that. How have you experienced that gray area as a leader in the law, and where have you seen it go right and go wrong as a Citadel graduate?
Well, I'm glad you asked that. You know, there are, as we know, there are good folks and bad folks in every line of business. Some are terrible leaders. Some are great leaders. You know, in the legal business, you can see some shady things from shady lawyers, frankly. But you also see some very fine lawyers doing some very fine things, helping our nation and helping people who are really in desperate need, and folks who come to you with their most urgent problems in many cases because they're problems they can't handle on their own. They need some professional help to get through a situation, whether it's a business situation, a family situation, or perhaps even a criminal situation. So there are lots of things out there. And I think, I mean, you've heard some great descriptions of what good leaders do and don't do. But, you know, to your question, I think that I have witnessed, you know, I've tried to always lead, and in terms of my ethics, in terms of my morals, in terms of my decisions, by doing, again, the right thing. You know, let's follow the rules. Let's work hard, strike hard but fair blows, and try and succeed. And I did learn almost all those things go back to the traits that you've heard these other guys speak about in terms of caring for your people, being willing to demonstrate to them that you do care, seeing what their needs are, and also having them literally watch you performing at you know, in tough situations, and teaching them and mentoring them through those circumstances. So I think that there are lots of opportunities in business, as there are in virtually every walk of life, to cut corners. But that's not what we do at the Citadel. We don't cut corners. We square out our corners, and you know, that is going to, you know, I wanted to speak to the vision issue that you said also, and that I think you know, some of the most important things I learned, probably the most important things I learned, were doing it right, being prepared, working very hard at getting it right. And if you don't succeed, as Pete said, you get up, dust yourself off, and try again until you do succeed. Those are all great things that you learned at the Citadel. They're not courses necessarily that you're picking up, but they are character traits. And most importantly, from my perspective, is your integrity, your honor, your word. If you say you're going to do something, you do it. If it doesn't succeed, you take responsibility because you own it. And people respect that, and they'll come back to you. Like I said, as Greg said, you know, sometimes we lose tactically, but we win strategically. And I think that's very, very true in business. It's not always about what happens today. It's about what happens over your career.
I think that you make an excellent point. If you're not actively inside an organization that talks about core values, talks about ethics actively and openly, you know, a lot of cadets, by the time they do 4 years of all of this leadership training, all of this ethics training, it's been beaten into their head left and right. It feels like overkill to them. How can this possibly? It's
not overkill.
It becomes a huge advantage when you step out into the world and you realize that's an anchor point. And it sounds like it's been a thread through all of your careers. And as we go around one last time here, in the interest of time and respecting your time here and the cadets' time for our class, I want to ask you all to answer one or maybe both of these questions. The first question is, what do you wish you had known as a senior at the Citadel that you know now, given all of your experience in all these amazing career fields? And the other question is, what might you have done as a cadet differently that would have helped you as a leader immediately after graduation? So the two questions again are, what do you wish you had known then that you know now, given all of the experience and wisdom you've accumulated over the years? And secondly, what might you have done differently as a cadet that could have helped you immediately as a leader after graduation? And Mr. May, if you don't mind, I'm going to start with you, sir.
Sure. Yeah, I'd say in terms of what I would like to have known entering my industry, finance, and it's really pretty simple. Two things. One is don't be afraid to ask questions. And when I first started my career, I had the false assumption that everyone around me expected me to be an expert in either banking or finance. So I spent a ton of time independently researching, always trying to find the answers. And yes, granted, knowledge is power, and a good leader has knowledge of policies and procedures. But at the end of the day, when you first start, everyone knows that you're green as grass, and they don't expect you to know everything. And and asking questions is not an indication of ignorance. In fact, frankly, it's a sign of engagement. So don't ever be afraid to ask questions. And it's that simple. The second thing that I would encourage you to do, and I know I struggled a little bit initially in my career, was listen. And that may sound really simple, but I got to tell you, a lot of leaders don't listen. And to be an effective listener, you've got to be able to be silent. And being silent forms and creates a two-way dialogue. Good listening is an important tool to help build self-esteem with your team members. And good listening is what an effective coach does. And that individual can make suggestions in a very non-threatening way if they're a good listener. So I would encourage you to think about that. Don't be afraid to ask questions and be a good listener.
That's great advice. I've never heard that before. You're as green as grass, but that is true of many of myself and many lieutenants I've worked with. So Mr. Salerno, what about you, sir?
I'd like to make 6 quick points that I wrote down. Great. That I think were imperative for myself growing in as a businessman. Number 1, do what you love. Follow your passion. Don't follow the money, because if you follow your passion, you'll be successful. Number 2 is be an expert in your field. Number 3 is be the best in your industry. Because if you are, then you don't have to worry about anything else. People will come and find you because you are an expert and you are the best. Number 4, try to be your own boss. If you can, then obviously you'll be able to reap the benefits of your efforts as well as your talents. Number 5, create a network. It's critical you create a network. Without a network, you can't build yourself and build your business. And that is a major key to success. And number 6, you make a living from 9 to 5, but you build your fortune from 5 to 9. And those are key things that I just found to be imperative that I've learned along the way that I like to share with the cadets. And if they could follow any of those, I think it would be very helpful for them.
I mean, it's helpful for me, and I just am so thankful these cadets get to hear that from you. Mr. Mills.
I'll be brief, but I think, one of the things that I learned from the Citadel was sometimes when you're a leader, decisions are really tough. I mean, they are, you don't even like them, but they have to be made. And, sometimes you've got to, as the leader, you've got to make some tough calls. Don't be afraid to do that. I think as a young cadet transitioning into a professional world, I've hired literally hundreds of lawyers in these 2 law firms over 35 years, probably. I think that what employers are looking for are, it's not necessarily the smartest guy in the room. I've interviewed lots of those guys, and most of them I didn't hire. But they're looking for the best rounded one. They want someone to be intelligent. They want someone to be likable. They want someone to have a great work ethic. They want someone to have high integrity and high energy. All of those things are what the Citadel excels at. So what I wish I had known was just that. I don't have to be the smartest guy in the room. I just have to work hard and follow all of those traits that I've already learned and I'm going to be successful. I second what Peter said. Follow your passion, build the network, get involved in your community, and the rest will take care of itself.
That's fantastic. What I hear from you, Mr. Mills, is that it works. The Citadel path works. You follow those core values, you learn how to persevere, work hard, have that fortitude, and you apply it to your trade, and it will pay dividends. Mr. Horton, you're the penultimate speaker here, and then I'll pass it off to General Nicholson to wrap it up. You're on mute, sir.
Thank you for the correction. I'll be brief. Well, one thing I wish I had learned that after going through the 4th class system, once I got married, I would have to go through the 4th class system again to be a knob. But seriously, one I already mentioned about being, I wish the Citadel had spent more time with us, giving us examples of what that gray world was out there or is out there, instead of, you know, the right and the wrong. And another thing I'll just pass off to everyone is, a lot of people will spend most of their time trying to prove they're right, okay? Sometimes, as an old preacher told me, sometimes you can be right and make an enemy for life. It's not about always being right, it's about being effective. So focus more on not the self-righteous thing in life, but how to be effective in leadership, how to be an effective communicator and an effective listener. So,
thank you, Mr. Horton. That is terrific advice. General Nicholson, we'll wrap up with you this evening, sir.
Thanks, Ted. Hey, look, it's tough to follow this eye-watering group of accomplished professionals here, but let me give it a shot and follow. I think I'm going to take Pete's lead and just come up with got a list of a couple things I scribbled down here. And I think I'll follow on his theme of, find something you love doing, find something that makes you jump out of bed. And if you can find that in industry, in business, or in government, you know, you're never going to work another day in your life because you can't wait to get started. That doesn't mean you don't have bad days. And it's like I used to tell our guys in combat, hey, we're going to have good days and bad days. More good than bad, but the bad ones can be, they can be a real punch in the gut. I didn't realize how quickly a reputation builds in an organization even as small as our Marine Corps, 180,000. But you look at the Glenn Walters, you look at the Frank McKenzie's, you look at the Greg Hortons. I mean, you look at the guys that are on this panel. Reputation builds really fast, especially when you're doing something good or not good. But very quickly, if you have a reputation of doing it right, whether it's building furniture or whether it's, you know, being a tactical commander, people will seek you out. They will find you, and you will be given more and more responsibility. You know, I saw a lot of great Marines fail on the family front. And I think for anyone thinking about going into the military, you know, there's an old saying that, you know, one day you're going to retire, you're going to do an about face with a medal on your chest, you're going to look in the bleachers and your family's not going to be there because you may succeed on that parade deck, but if you don't succeed in all parts of your life, it's really hard to say you've accomplished everything you want to accomplish. So military life can be very, very hard for a family. You know, I've moved 20 some times, and it's tough on kids, it's tough on the spouse. And so that's a relationship you have to nurture. You have to spend time working that just as hard as you do anything in your profession. You know, in my profession, mistakes cost lives. So I think one of the speakers mentioned, man, you got to become a subject matter expert, whether it's a lawyer like Seth or whatever it is you're going to do. Dig into it. You can't short shrift it. You can't just you can't coast. If you're going to be whatever you're going to do, learn everything you can. If you're going to be that artilleryman, if you're going to be that banker, learn everything you can, learn as much about it, ask all the questions, and become that subject matter expert that will be sought out. Become that indispensable individual. Last thing on leadership really is you can't fake it. And what I didn't talk about is, you know, the young men and women you lead in uniform route. And now I work in a company with, 24 warehouses, and I had the great opportunity to visit all of them routinely all over the country. And And I walk through those warehouses, and I can tell where, you know, the good leaders, the good, you know, young supervisors are working, and I can tell where they're not. You know, people look you in the eye. They want to tell you about what they're doing. They want to tell you how long they've been there. They're obviously proud of what they're doing. Or when they see you coming, they walk the other way, and they try to get away. And I think that has a lot to do with that deck plate leadership we talk about. You can't fake it. A young Marine will give his life. You know, a young soldier Marine will give his life if he believes in the leader, if he believes in the mission. And but boy, young Marines and sailors and soldiers and airmen, they can smell a phony a mile away. And you know, for that young lieutenant coming out, that young ensign coming out, if you're not genuine, if you don't have their best interest at heart, they're going to sniff that out real quick, and your life's going to get really challenging. Hey, the last thing is it's about humility. It's about humility. It's not about you. When you get out there and you start that new career, military or not, it's not about you. And I love the old Colin Powell quote. He's already been mentioned tonight, but the quote is, it's amazing what a team can accomplish when nobody's worried about who's going to get the credit. And I'll tell you, I absolutely subscribe to that. You know, teamwork is the essence of what I've been doing for 40 years and what I'm doing again now. But it's not about you. It's about the team you're in. It's about the team you're on. It's about the family that you're in. So again, Ted, thanks for organizing this. Thanks for the opportunity to make a few comments. And again, great to reconnect with some classmates I haven't seen in many, many years, but thank you.
Well, gentlemen, thank you. And thank you to the class of 79 for sponsoring Leadership Day. We're very grateful for your continued support of the school, both time, talent, and treasure, the way you're talking to these cadets today, sharing your experiences, helping them think beyond that military career, or as they step out into a job that's not military, what their lives can look like, and setting that example and letting them know that the system works. They need to take care of their families. I've picked up numerous leadership techniques, traits, tactics, procedures tonight. Really a fantastic, phenomenal panel. I really thank you all for participating, and I look forward to speaking to you all again soon.